Hey everybody, I'm Rick Beato.
I'm Rhett Shull.
Dave Onorato.
So today we're going to talk about, is vintage gear worth the money? So I have a 1965, I guess, right Dave? SG that I bought from Dave.
Right, Dave?
And this is an amazingly great guitar. It plays incredibly well, and I was just talking with Dave about why it plays well, and Dave says one of the reasons is... Go ahead, Dave, you tell.
This guitar has a stop modification where they took off the original tremolo system and put a stop tailpiece on it, and where they put it is actually a little farther back than where it would normally be.
Normally it would be about here.
Yeah, a reissue would be like up in here.
Closer to the Les Paul, right?
Perfect.
Yeah.
And
you can look at the difference between the Les Paul and that. Huge difference.
Yeah, and the difference, it's a little further back. My feeling is that it actually changes the tension of the strings a little bit, and this guitar plays really well.
Yeah.
And
the strings feel really loose. It's so easy to play.
And it's really loud as far as acoustically, too,
Yeah.
which I think with the less severe down break, it's got a little bit more to ring here.
This is way lower in pitch because there's more distance here than that.
So it's almost more like a jazz master in that way.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's almost like a trapeze, tailpiece, or a jazz master almost, kind of. But it still does have the studs into the body, so you get a lot more sustain with it. It takes away from the vintage value of it from an originality standpoint, but as far as a player and everything else, it's actually better in my opinion.
Okay, so all three of these guitars are my guitars, and we would say these are vintage guitars. This is a 57 Country and Western.
Yeah.
This is a 1990. That's vintage, right, at this point?
It is at this
1990 Les Paul Custom.
It's exactly as old as I am.
I realize that the only vintage guitars I own are Gibson vintage guitars. I don't know why. I have
hint, hint.
I have this beautiful PRS right here, but it's brand new.
Yeah.
And pretty much all my other guitars, not all of them. I have
got your Guild.
My Guild is from the 70s,
Yeah.
and my Telly is 20 years old. I mean, some of these other things, my Les Pauls are...
Got the early 80s Aria, Ellis.
But for the most part, these are really the oldest.
Yeah, these three are probably...
These are the oldest guitars. Now, are they worth it? Now, talk about the wood in the guitar, Dave. Let's talk about what you're saying. This is one thing, and there's a lot of debate about wood and guitars. Go ahead, Dave.
They're...
Rhett's favorite subject.
Yeah. My personal opinion, after owning thousands of vintage guitars, not just
Literally.
Gibsons, Fenders, Gretches, you name it, Martins, to me, the 40s, 50s, and 60s guitars, sonically, overall, not all of them, but sonically, to me, ring better, have much louder volume to them, even tend to be more stable and neck-wise. And I really think it's because the wood that they were pulling from was at least at that time, you think 40s and 50s.
And where was it from?
Well, it depended on where they were getting what it was. But like the mahogany was Honduras typically. The maple was kind of from all over, but typically it was from North America, Canada too also. Ebony, all of these woods were all 100 to maybe 200 years old when they cut them in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
So now that these guitars are even 50, 60 years old, now we're talking that the wood in the guitars could possibly be as old as 200 years plus.
Okay, so I've noticed that this guitar is the loudest electric guitar that I have by a mile.
Acoustically.
It is incredibly... It's incredibly loud. It vibrates. The whole guitar vibrates. And I think because of drying out, the wood dries out. Same thing with this guitar.
Yeah.
People that have heard this and that have watched my acoustic guitar video, everybody said, how did you mic that guitar? I said, I used the mic that we're using that's 5 feet, 6 feet away.
Yeah, this guitar... I don't even have a pick. I'm just playing it.
Yeah, it's an incredibly loud guitar,
loud,
but it's very light.
Yeah.
So it's great. It's very well balanced.
Yeah.
Now, what kind of mahogany would that be there?
This is Honduras, just like that.
Same thing.
And as with the custom too. So.
But to play devil's advocate here, we can all agree that those characteristics make a great guitar, right? It projects, it resonates. Usually it's lightweight.
Yeah.
But those characteristics are not unique to vintage instruments.
No, they're not.
So that's the question. Is it worth... Now, these are all, not crazy money, super high end collectible. These are pretty much all player grade, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
player
like,
grade.
Yeah.
what we're I think kind of getting at here is like when you start getting into the bursts and you start getting into the early 50s stuff where you're close to six figures and above.
Yeah. Yeah.
Personally, and now I've had very limited experience playing guitars of that price range, but I have yet to play one that blew me away. The closest thing was, and I actually made a video about it, was a 1963 35
Yeah, right.
at Chicago Music Exchange.
Was it an actual one you're saying?
Yeah, it was a real 1960.
That's right, I remember that.
Yeah, because we should talk about the custom shop and the reissues versus all that stuff. But it was a real 1960 natural finish, had a 345 fretboard on it, had a big, gorgeous guitar, sounded and played incredible, and they were asking like 75.5 for it, which is expensive.
That's kind of expensive. Now, when I went to the PRS factory, part of their process of making the guitar is drying out the wood. They put it in these kilns for long periods of time, and they measure the amount of moisture that's coming from the guitars. And this is how they age the wood. And he is incredibly knowledgeable about this stuff. And I saw on Tim Pierce's channel, they compared that 59 Les Paul with Paul's
that single cut,
and they sounded,
it was 98%.
Yeah.
Very, very close.
And actually, so speaking of Paul Reed Smith, I actually met him this past weekend. He came here to Righteous Guitars and did a talk, and he brought something up that I had never thought about before, and I've been thinking about it since. And he was talking about pickups when he said this, but people love to, what does a 59 PAF cost now? Like $3,000-$4,000 a pickup.
A black bobbin one, a normal one, it's probably about $2,000, $2,500 a piece.
Right, and what, like a 63 Strat pickup? What do you?
Probably maybe $500-$600.
Okay, so
a piece.
He used the example of "Wind Cries Mary," which I think is Hendrix's best song overall, and some of the best tone that Hendrix ever got was on "Wind Cries Mary."
Yes,
some of that is where he's playing on the neck too, and what he's playing.
Here's the thing: that was recorded at the time with a brand new guitar and a brand new amplifier.
Yeah.
Right? We think of it now today. I've always thought of it as like, oh yeah, it was a vintage Strat. Of course it's not, or vintage Plexi or whatever. It's like, no, that was off the shelf, brand new.
Yeah, right.
68.
Yeah, all those old records that people playing brand new instruments, pretty much.
And that's CBS era Fender, which in the collector's world, people love to stick their noses up at.
Yeah, you figure at the time when he cut that, Strats were only 15 years old.
Yeah. Right. So what year was that? 67, 68?
It would have been 67, 68.
All right, and CBS took over in 65.
Yeah, late 64, early 65, yeah.
Yeah. So, again, to me, that's the kind of thing where it's like, okay, is the vintage thing worth it? I mean, sure, if you're a collector and you like owning all this stuff, but as a player, which I'm not a collector, and I'm taking this stuff out on the road and actually using it, I'm much more interested in how does it feel and how does it sound. The characteristics that we talked about. I have a couple of brand new guitars that do that thing. They ring like a bell, they resonate, and they weren't $50,000.
Right. I think partly the vintage, the whole vintage thing, why it got started originally was guys in the 70s started buying brand new Les Pauls and Strats of the day. So like in 75, 76, 77, you'd go and buy a new Strat. You'd pull it off the wall and you go, well, this doesn't play or sound or feel like anything.
This is the worst era of both companies.
Right. And so what you have to realize is the entire vintage market pretty much was based in the 70s, from the very late 60s on. So those generation of guys they went in and said, well, that's not the same guitar that my brother has or one I've played. Why? So I'm going to go buy an old one because at the time they were cheaper.
Oh my God, you buy them for
and you were like
$400.
The old ones. So everybody went out. That started to grow, and everyone okay, you got to buy an old one because those are the good ones.
Yeah.
And of course, not all of those were good either, but they were better than your typical stuff that was on the wall at the time.
How much could you buy a 50s Les Paul for in 1975? Late 50s?
Probably mid-70s. I remember my dad selling some. We had a 58 that we sold in 1980 for $3,500 or $4,000. Mid-70s, it would have been probably 2 to 2,500.
So adjusted for inflation today, that's what, probably 8 to 10 grand, something like that.
It's cheap. Actually.
Yeah. That's not.
Right.
That's what you would pay for a custom shop 59 today.
Yeah. Right. Of course, but those guitars now, that same burst, that it would be probably on the low side, maybe 300, high side $500,000. So, and I can tell you from experience, it was a great guitar, but it wasn't that great. Right. You know, it was a really nice guitar, but it was not. I love vintage stuff, but as far as the prices, to me, $500,000 for any kind of guitar, I don't care who it is, what it is, it's. What you're paying for is the market now is strictly either people who have a lot of money, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing. If you have a lot of money, you want to go buy guitars, I encourage it. You could buy a whole lot worse things with your money. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the high-end market is pushed by, hey, look what I got.
Right.
You know, or the rarity.
I think Neil Schoen has actually made the guitar market go up in value. Everything he's purchased over the last month on his Instagram.
I did notice he's bought a lot of really great stuff, man. Hey, dude, I mean, I'll give it to Neil. He buys the best of the best, though. Everything that I've seen him buy was dead mint or like
I've been wanting to ask Dave that if he's been following Neil's. Have you seen his? Oh my god!
Yeah, he's been buying some amazing guitars the last couple of months.
It must be 30 guitars he's bought.
They're all just amazing. I mean, he's, okay, that's the one example I could go, okay, he deserves it, man, because,
when you're Neil,
right, okay.
Yeah, of course. Right.
But as far as the vintage market, it started as that. So it was a lack of good guitars.
Right.
Now, you can get great guitars. You can get great cheap guitars.
Right.
I mean, your favorite guitar half the time is the Dano that you have.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
What does that say? That says that the technology has gotten to a point where we can make really great stuff actually fairly cheaply.
Or it says that you can get used to anything, really.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that Dano's a great guitar. I mean, that's,
that Les Paul, the special over there is a great guitar. That was $600, something brand new. When you got
those were. I mean, So the difference is the wood in those guitars that great? No. But that doesn't.
Is there any wood in that Dan Electro?
The wood bridge, or no, that one doesn't have the wood bridge, or does it? I can't remember. No, okay, but
it's so good.
Yeah,
I think the neck is wood.
Yeah, I think it's a maple neck. Okay, but like you were saying, right? It's kind of to the point where you can totally get a loud guitar now. You can, so I think more now it's the. Look what cool thing I've got.
Okay, so
honest.
When I take this, any PRS that I've gotten, I take it out of the case and it plays incredibly well. It's made unbelievably well.
Paul's always made great stuff.
Great stuff.
I've had stuff of his since '82.
Nothing will need to get repaired on this guitar for years. It'll need a fret job maybe if you play like Dave in 15 years. And if I'm playing it, it'll never need.
Yeah, you'll never need it. Right?
It'll never need a fret job.
Yeah, or Rhett. Yeah, me or Rhett. If we got it, we're gonna trash it.
I have the touch of a blacksmith on my guitar.
Yeah, so I will never need a fret. I think I asked Dave how many fret jobs I've had ever. I think 2.
I've done 2.
I've played guitar for 40 years.
And it's great. The 2 guitars that I refretted have no wear whatsoever on them after a couple of years. So it's
So if you buy a new guitar like this, a PRS, if you spend the money, this guitar is honestly, it's worth more than, it's really worth more than those Gibsons. It's worth probably what my SG is worth. No, it's probably worth more than my SG.
It's actually more money now. Yeah,
more money than my SG. I mean, I don't know how much that guitar is worth right there.
Well, this one, it's been modified a little bit, so it's a refinish and stuff. But I mean, this is still, I would say, $3,000, $3,500 guitar. Not counting in the factor of the tonal properties of this particular guitar. If this was on the wall at a vintage store, it'd be $3,500.
Yeah.
So
it's worth $10,000.
Right. It's one of those. Right. So then you have to factor in what is the tone and the playability worth.
Give you a $2,750 for it right now.
See, I will always spend the money.
Give you $30 for it.
To me, it's worth spending the extra money for something that sounds good if I think I can make money from it, meaning whether it's gigging or if I'm producing bands. There's this 72 Plexi that was at a store today, so I text Dave. I said, "What do you think, Dave? Is this worth $2,300 or whatever?" And Dave's like, "No,
aluminum front."
And I don't know. I don't know how much it's worth. Dave was like 1900. That's it.
Yeah.
And I was like, it sounds great though, and it's in really good condition. He goes, well, but that's just not worth that much. And so
I did preface though. I said if it really sounds that good, then you have to figure in the factor of.
Now I did not buy it. I don't obviously need any amps, but in my mind, I thought, well, I could probably sell a couple things, and if I wanted to get that, but. Is it worth the extra, paying an extra $400 for something if it sounds good? And the problem nowadays is you cannot play through things. That white Les Paul Custom was in a shop here in town, Big House Guitars, and I got to play it. Now, I have not bought one. I did buy one. I bought a 74 and it came and the headstock was broken on it and I sent it back. Yeah. And that's my only time I tried to buy a guitar Les Paul through the mail like that I saw on Reverb. And that was my experience. So I would never buy another guitar like that. So then you're basically stuck going to stores. Mm-hmm. And we just don't have the stores around here. You have to go to Nashville essentially or LA
for vintage stuff.
There's a few stores, but it's finding a nice white custom anywhere is kind of tough. So it's there, So.
Okay, so the availability of these things to actually play, if you're going to buy something vintage, you're probably not, half the time you're not going to get to play it.
Right.
And you're just buying it on.
And that's the thing. Just
hope.
Because it's old doesn't mean that it's good, right? It's not like every 50s through 1960 Les Paul was a ringer. Like they made some,
I've played really beautiful ones that were not great guitars, like just feeling and sounding.
And that's the thing, man. I just feel like nowadays, I say this a lot. I feel like we live in the golden age of gear when it comes to guitar. I mean, the amps, the new guitars, the pedals, the gear, everything. There's so many different ways to come at this instrument now.
Yeah.
As a player, like from that perspective, as the youngest one here and someone who doesn't own any vintage stuff and quite frankly can't afford any of the vintage stuff that I would want to own, not even close. Mm-hmm. I just don't know that it's worth it, man, because the reality is if I went out and got a 52 Blackguard Telly, would love to own one of those. But what are those, 50, upwards of 40 or 50 now?
50 to 60 to 70 for a really nice one.
Dude, if I bought a 52 Blackguard Telly for $50,000, that thing is never leaving the house. It's going to stay at home, locked away in some safe.
Right.
And at that point, like, why even have it?
That again,
that's the thing. When you talk about, you heard the term player grade. When people say player grade, that means you can actually bring it to a gig.
Yeah, it means it's a.
That's what that term means.
It's an original guitar that was modified enough to where it affected the value at least half of what it's probably worth. It was mint condition. There's varying grades of it, but that's what a player grade is.
Okay, so when I met Peter Frampton and interviewed him, I walked into his studio in Nashville, and he handed me his black Les Paul, and I was stunned, and I played it for a second, and it played it really well. It was very easy to play. It had a very thin neck. It was a 54, but it had been modded. They had shaved the neck down so much that it played like a 1960 Les Paul, which is, I think, why I bought the J.J. Cale one after he lost that one.
Yeah, he has smaller hands. And, right.
So, this is what he sat with when I interviewed him, and he took it home with him. He packed it up, put it in his car, and left. That's the guitar he plays,
That's his guitar.
Guitar.
I saw him at Crossroads, and he and Clapton played together at Crossroads for apparently the first time ever in history.
Yep. That was awesome.
They played My Guitar Gently Weeps, and he had the Les Paul, and I was there with my dad. And
me.
Yeah.
I don't count, though.
Yeah, but you were not. Anyways, you were backstage hanging out, and we were out in the crowd. But it was one of those moments that was like, we're witnessing.
No, I was actually out in front with you guys when he was playing with Clapton. It was amazing. I
was so mesmerized.
He was very humbled because he's...
Dude, he started crying on stage.
Yeah, he's 69. Yeah. Peter Frampton is 69, Eric Clapton is 74. So they're 5 years apart, but Eric Clapton was a massively big influence on Peter. Peter told me during the interview, and Peter consciously made a decision to not go in the Clapton direction because everyone was imitating Clapton at that time in London in the 60s. But when I was backstage, I was there with our friend Peter Stroud, who plays with Sheryl Crow, and he's a great guitar player, and he knows a ton about amps.
Oh yeah,
he's an expert, and we saw Peter's rig back there, and I said, "Do you think that's the?" I said, "What is that, Marshall?" He said, "That's early '70s." I said, "Is that the one you think he might have played on the Comes Alive record?" He said, "This probably is."
Well, they had the drum kit from the Comes Alive record. Like he found
the kit. Yep.
Yeah,
they had
on
that.
eBay apparently.
Well, and think about it. I mean, Frampton, he bought all of that stuff when it was new.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Here again,
or he either bought it or
very
was
close to new or given it.
Yeah. You figure Humble Pie, it was,
Right. It was all late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah.
That Les Paul Custom he got given
to him, yeah.
And that guitar was a heavily modified guitar.
Modified.
It had original P90s originally in it, 2 pickup. It got routed for 3 humbuckers. The headstock has been, I think, broken once at one point. It went through the fire. It's
player grade.
Yeah, it's totally a player grade guitar. Yeah. If that guitar was just hanging on the wall and it had no history, people would go, "Oh, okay, it's like a $10,000 guitar." Yeah, they'd be like, "What's that pile of crap?" But okay, so here comes back to what I was trying to say. It's that the dollar figure is attached to the cool factor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what you're paying for in a lot of this vintage stuff. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that's a big part of it.
Well, and I think this then becomes a case for the boutique builders out there and the custom shops out there, Fender, Gibson, whoever. Because in the boutique world, you have people that are building incredibly nice instruments of all different stripes, whether it be Fenders, Gibsons, or unique things, and then the custom shop stuff. I mean, you have a custom shop 335 over there.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
it plays phenomenally well. And Dave will tell you about the color on it because he actually
is that the Antigua burst?
Dave is an expert. Dave is the only person that knows this stuff that. He was,
I'm not the only person who knows, but I noticed it right when you got the guitar.
Oh, you got the Argentine burst.
He pulls it out, and I look at it and I go, "Oh, it's Argentine gray," which is a color that was only offered.
I thought it was a sunburst.
Yeah, well, you said, "Oh no, it's tobacco." I'm like, "No, this is Argentine gray," and what it is there's a lack of any red in it, so it goes from natural to black.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And in '59 and '60, they made a handful of these guitars in this color, and they're extremely rare now. And actually, Samana just bought one. A real mint one, and they were floating around for a long time, and people didn't like them. I remember, like in the mid '90s,
and they didn't like them because why?
They just weren't a popular color. And 335.
I just noticed the checkering on that is amazing.
Checking, yeah.
This is all
checking.
Yeah, this is
that's all. I think
induced.
razor blade.
Yeah, it's razor blade induced and stuff. But
is it really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's like a person literally with a razor.
Yeah,
blade,
you sit there and you do lines and but this color, like if this was an original guitar.
Yeah.
In this condition, you're talking probably, 40 to 50 probably for the color if it was really right. Maybe a little less, but for a really nice one. And
that is an incredibly well made guitar.
Yeah, and so that's
right.
probably worth what, like 6 or 7 for the custom shop one.
Really loud.
Yes.
Nice. The neck is very similar.
So
to
easy to play.
Yeah, this is a really well built guitar.
I actually have the exact same one they gave me to take on the Black Keys tour. It's the same burst and everything, and it plays amazing.
Yeah.
The custom buckers that they have in there are fantastic.
Yeah.
And to me, so that's the question. Like, is it worth? Let's just say for the sake of argument that guitar is 75% as good as the real one. I think it's probably
it's 99. It's 95% as
right, but
it's probably more than that.
Yeah,
it's probably better than the real one.
What I can tell you from the aspect of the 3 things that I noticed right off the bat from owning originals and working on these guitars, the neck angle is correct on this. A lot of the 50s ones were shallow. And in 58, 59, the very early ones, most of them don't play that good because they've got a really shallow neck angle and the bridge is shallow. You have to take this bridge and get it all the way down to the top of the guitar just to get the action down, and it's still not right. Perfect example right there. That guitar wasn't built right from the beginning. Okay, so the first year 58s, if you know what you're looking at, you're going to be like, well, the first thing you do is you look at a 58 and go, well, how's the neck angle on it? If you know the guitars well enough, because it's not saying that the guitar's a bad guitar. It's just saying structurally, it was a brand new guitar. They had just debuted it and they didn't work the bugs out. So the early ones, a lot of very early ones have really shallow.
So who
neck
told
angle.
them that this wasn't right, Dave? The players back
Probably
then, right?
players, or maybe guys on the line that started figuring out that this wasn't right. So they changed the heel design and got the neck higher up to get a better pitch.
Yep.
So when you buy a brand new one like this, you never have to worry about that.
Right.
It's already been done. So
Yeah.
Gibson's reverse engineered all this stuff for years.
Yep.
So from a building standpoint, this is actually better than a real 58 in that aspect.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's things like that a lot of people don't realize too. Obviously a lot of guys do who deal in vintage, but your average buyers might not know that, and you'll go and play a guitar and you'll be like, well, why is this one cheaper than a normal? Like, why is this 58 cheaper than this 59? Well, because that one has a shallow neck angle.
Right.
It's things like that you kind of have to,
Interesting.
figure out or get schooled on, so so anytime somebody calls me or asks me about buying vintage guitars, and I say, well, don't just buy any one, because they're all, like you said, there's hit and miss. They're not all great. They're not, and just like anything else, they had to work out bugs on a lot of their guitars. So in the vintage ones,
Okay,
and
so-
those guitars float around, and they're a lot of money now, but they have problems with them.
Okay, so one thing that I never hear about anymore is vintage pedals. Rarely. People don't really buy vintage pedals anymore. Not very often. Certain designs.
Only guys I know are guys who have studios who basically at this point, like, well, I've always wanted a real Univibe, or I've always and they've got the money and they're like,
vintage
okay, I'll buy it.
fuzzes are still a thing for sure.
Yeah.
And like original Univibes or wahs for sure. Like a lot of the early
Pedals
60s
you can't
stuff.
get the resistors for anymore.
Right.
is a
Well,
big
that's
part
why I
of it.
bought that tone bender, was because it's got the real components in it,
Yeah.
the new old stock stuff that you can't get anymore,
the
and it was
German ones,
it's expensive. But it's you're right, because pedal design nowadays, I think, outside of like the fuzz world, and even some fuzzes I think are just better designed. They sound better, they're more reliable, and they're
They're
cheaper.
smaller,
They're
too.
smaller.
That's the
They're-
other thing.
They're easier to power. They're easier to live with. I mean, it's just one of those things where, and this is kind of like that PRS model, right? Where it's like every year they're striving to make the guitars, the pedals or whatever they're doing, better than the year before. And that's why, going back to that idea of like the golden age of gear, man, like there's some really, really good stuff out there that's accessible for a lot of people.
Okay, another case in point. I have a lot of BAE 1073 mic pre's. I've got 1073s. I got the 1032s, the 1066s. The 1032 is a 1073 mic pre with an expanded mid range, and BAE, which is British Audio Engineering, makes exact Neve copies. They're identical, and they sound phenomenal. And they don't, to buy a vintage Neve would be, to me, just a waste of money. There's no point in buying it.
Just to say, hey, I've got a Neve. That's
how
really,
many,
at this point, that's really what it is.
You look at the caps that most of these things need to have the capacitors, cap jobs, and
that's going to totally change the sound of it.
Exactly. Yeah. And what the records that you heard the stuff on, the things were new when they made it. It's the same. It always comes back to that.
And it was to tape.
Yeah,
it was to tape. It was like,
Well, and the components, the tolerance, like in this, it's this way with amps too, with vintage amps. It's like, Tweed Deluxes or whatever. I mean, they all sounded different because the tolerances and the components were so wide and so varied.
Yes.
Like you could take the same value capacitor and it would have a Fender, I think, what did they use? Up to like 15% tolerance. Variance.
I can tell you, like with my 58 Deluxe, the original one, if I change one thing in that amp, it completely throws the amp into a whole new. So it's very, very particular, and so, but the variances were very great. Yes.
So I have this interesting. I think about this a lot too, and with all the gear nowadays, especially like the boutique gear, and I think about this in terms of amps a lot. What stuff is made today that's easily accessible that in 20, 25 years is going to be highly sought after? Maybe not, 59 Les Paul prices, but stuff that people are going to want to get their hands on because they knew, this era of this thing was, like, you already see it now with like Samson era matchless amps, like the early 90s matchless amps. That people are really after those, and those prices are,
of course, that
insane.
was honestly that was that way 10 years ago, even for that era of the
Right.
the Mansell amps.
What my question is, what of today will be like that? Like, what should we be trying to get our hands on today? And I have one idea, but I'm interested too.
So what I think is actually the stuff that'll be worth money is stuff that's it'll be based on the rarity of the piece, the lineage of the piece, who made it or who's using it, and whether or not it sounds really good, and whether it's pretty readily available. Even if it's rare, there'll be a time period where it'll be people will go like, oh, I could still get one of those fairly. You know? And then that's when everything goes through the roof, after people start realizing that there's only 100 pieces, but there's 500 people that want it. So,
I mean, it could be a 2019 McCarty 594. That's the year that
very well be.
Because I have this guitar and I'm playing it, and well, it's actually not going to be me because nobody's really going to care what I played, but maybe somebody like Rhett because he's playing it, but. That someone well known at the time, or maybe maybe a guitar that John Mayer, his Silver Sky, may be the one that 25 years from now is like, oh my God, the first year of Silver Sky was it 2018?
Well, that Super Eagle, the PRS Super Eagle, those already, like, people bought them and immediately resold them for way more than what they paid for them.
Because of the
rarity, limited numbers. Mayer was playing them, and they were a super I think they only did like 2 runs of them, of like
I think so,
a couple hundred maybe. Yeah. I think for me, one of the ones that sticks out are divided by 13 amps. Because I think they tick all those boxes that you were talking about.
Yeah,
you know, it's one guy building them, Fred Taccone, out of his basically his garage in California. Insanely well made amplifiers. I think Park is the same way.
Yeah, Park. Mitch Colby.
Yeah, Mitch. It's like where you have just the one person doing it. They sound they're amazingly well built. They sound amazing. You know, I mean, these are heirloom pieces of gear. These are stuff that are going to outlast all of us.
Yeah, and stuff like this, you know, you're not going to see those amps go down in price because 2 reasons. They are really built insanely great. So those amps could never be touted as, well, they had, you know, they weren't that great. No, they're great.
Beautifully made.
Yes, and the tone of those amps, I've yet to hear one that wasn't just fantastic.
Yeah.
So those are pretty much the guarantee.
I mean, honestly, I was thinking about this when we were setting up. The only amps that are new, really, behind me is the High Watt. That's a new amp, and it sounds killer. The Custom 50, the Custom 20 that's back here.
Yeah.
The Bad Cat, which is a great amp.
These are cool.
And the Park. But that's it. So wait, the Park?
No, you had the Park already.
Oh, you talking about new? Like,
I'm talking about new, not vintage.
Well, the orange.
That Plexi's a reissue.
That Plexi, but that Plexi's 15 years old, 20 years old or something.
All right.
So maybe, probably.
The orange rocker verb too is a new amp.
You got the EVH head. That's a.
Well, that was from 2005.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I mean, those are not. They've already gone through multiple versions of that amp.
That's true. Yeah.
That dual rectifier, many versions of that. You know, that the Vox is old.
I've got one that I definitely want to add to the list because it's something that I just basically tried and was blown away by.
Oh yeah,
and this is the future of what's going on.
Yeah, no, not joking. I have one of these as well. They
by the way, this is
24
one
pounds.
hand.
Yeah.
Deluxe reverb.
That's a solid state amp that all 3 of us like, right? Like,
yes, I couldn't believe it. Honestly,
so I'm going to eat crow. Even though I've got Blues Juniors, I've bought plenty of new Fender amps. You know, I definitely was suspect. Okay, this is going to be some.
I was too.
Yeah, and for what it does, for the features that it has, the weight. The looks, this amp is if companies keep doing this.
Well, tell them what it is, though. It's a solid state.
It's a solid state new deluxe reverb that's completely digital with no tubes.
Has a DI out on the back.
DI out
with an
attenuator in it.
Which I just found out tonight.
Why is it so loud?
It's too bad it's not quieter.
I mean, look, you can see there are
Rhett
no
says
tubes.
there's an attenuator on it. I said, where? On the back. Oh, I didn't look on the back.
No tubes in that chassis whatsoever. And
it sounds great.
And I got to tell you, this is if companies just keep doing this and keep doing it right, the vintage market is going to be in serious trouble because
Yeah.
this amp, even while I think it's a little expensive for what it is, it's I think it could come down in price just a little bit. This amp, I can't knock it because it does everything pretty much a Black Deluxe does. It's like a 95%er. Okay.
Yeah,
or at least
and
90%.
if this were $650, if they could get it down to that price,
yeah,
you could.
So okay, they sent me one. They reached out to me a few weeks ago via email, and I will admit I will also eat crow. They're like, hey, would you like one of the new Tone Master ones? And I said no. Because I had a stigma. It was solid state. I get it. It's
right. It's going to be a modeling, whatever.
They sent it to me anyways, and I plugged it up. And we were talking before we went on. This is not like a sponsored video.
No, we're not.
This is.
I didn't get one of these. I'm not.
If I was looking at buying a deluxe reverb today, and I was looking at this or the tube version of this, the DRRI, the reissue, I would buy this.
Yeah. So I was thinking the same thing. I said to Dave, I was like, "Did you try this amp? Oh, this thing sounds good."
I was like, "Yeah, it
sounds amazing." I couldn't believe it. It sounded way too good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you can knock this down to a half a watt.
Yeah,
play it in your bedroom and like crank it, and it's like, man, it really like would record great.
Yeah,
it's
great with pedals. I'm sure.
It's really good with pedals, dude. It's a gigging amp. Right?
It is. You could totally go. I would gig with this amp right now.
It weighs nothing.
No,
you can take it DI out on the back if you've got singers that complain about stage volume.
Yeah.
You can knock it down to half a watt, and it
looks cool.
It doesn't look real. It's like the electric car. You know what that is? That's the Tesla of amps right there.
Yeah, pretty much is.
It's an electric car that they made look cool that people would actually want to drive. That looks like a real deluxe reverb.
It does.
Yeah,
and people actually want to play.
What I want people to do, I want people to go out and play this amp, and I want to put in the comments in this video, go play this amp. I want to see what people really think of this amp because everybody that I know that's heard one of these so far, and they've all been pro players, all have said the same thing. Like, man, I don't want to like that amp, but that's an amazing amp for the money, and you can't.
I really didn't want to like it either. I said, I hope this doesn't sound good. And then I was like, no.
So Fender, you're on the right track with this, and hopefully a lot of the other digital companies will follow.
Now do a tweed one next.
Yeah, tweed one would be pretty smoking.
Or a super.
Yes, and Marshall make a blues breaker like this.
Yeah.
Vox make an AC30 like
Make an
this.
AC30 like that, yeah.
Take the cue, because this honestly is the future of amps that aren't boutique high-end dollar amps.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, this doesn't sound better than any of the boutique stuff.
No.
What we're talking about is like, you need an amp to play your bar gig with, your wedding gig with. Right. You need an amp to take to rehearsal that you're going to be lugging around and beating the crap out of.
Yes.
And you want to leave your nice stuff at home.
Yep.
That's a workhorse.
Take it on the road, not have to worry about tubes failing.
Oh, dude, yeah.
Not the weight alone. Put this. I mean, these are so light. You could take two of these on the road and put them in one case.
Yeah, I'm taking mine tomorrow. We're going out for 4 shows. And
yeah.
I'm just going to take it and throw
crank
it.
it. I really want to hear what it does, because it's especially, and it loves pedals, man. It really loves pedals. So it's hard. Like I said, I hate to say it, but. It's like I said, if they keep doing this stuff right, vintage stuff's gonna be like, that's all great and fine, but the reality is I can take this to a bar or club, never worry about it, and honestly, if it blows up, it's a Bic lighter, I'll go get another one. You know, it's not. That's
okay, so we want to hear your thoughts. If there's any vintage gear out there that you think can't be replicated, or if there's new things that you think are as good as the originals, as the vintage pieces of gear. Follow Rhett on his Instagram and his YouTube channel, which is...
Link below, just Rhett Shull.
Follow Dave on Instagram.
Link below.
Dojo Guitar
Dojo Guitar Repair on Instagram or Facebook.
Thanks for watching.